My apologies, Tonya.
Yes, we had apology from Councillor David Alexander.
Okay, thank you very much. For those that don't know, Councillor Alexander is the convener. I'm the deputy convener and I will be taking the meeting this morning. Declaration of interest. Just to clarify this, I'm going to read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time?
No.
None? Okay, thank you very much. That takes us to item 3 on your agenda, which is the minutes. It's the minute of meeting of the Planning Review Committee held on the 23rd of November 2021. It's pages 3 to 7 on your agenda. Is there any questions arising from that minute?
Nope.
No questions arising for that minute. That takes us to item 4, which is the Planning Review Committee procedures. And for a detail and overview of that, I'm going to hand you on to Douglas Blythe, one of our officers, to give us and take us through the procedures. Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you, Provost. I'll just briefly go over the procedures. They're noted there in the papers, but briefly, this is a review of an officer's decision. So this comes before the Planning Review Committee for a review. The first job for the committee is to assess the papers that they have before them and to determine whether they have sufficient information with which to make a determination. If they conclude that there is not sufficient information, then there are further procedures available. Potentially, they could ask for written submissions from the applicant or any interested party. They could have a site visit to the site to assess the location, and that would be either unaccompanied or accompanied. And potentially they could also have a hearing on specified matters. Broadly, this review is a de novo decision, so it comes before the committee and they have to assess this as they would any other planning application before them. So they have to assess this in terms of in line with the development plan, and to weigh up the relevant policies and make a decision based on those, and take into account any material considerations. So the papers are there before you, Provost and members, to assess. I'm sure Mr. Cooney will give a summary of the proposals, and you can assess the papers and determine whether any further procedure is needed or whether you're satisfied that you can go ahead with a determination today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. That takes us to item 5, which is the planning application P210025 full erection of dwelling house and associated infrastructure at Airlie House, Caronvale Road, Larbert. It's pages 13 to 201 on your agenda papers, and I'm going to ask the planning officer just to tell us who he is, his designation, and then carry on with the submission. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Provost and Deputy Convener. My name is John Cooney. I'm a planning officer in the development management team at Falkirk Council, and I am the appointed officer today. I wasn't the original officer, so my job is just to lay out the facts of the case for yourselves. So as the Provost alluded to, this review is sought for the erection of a dwelling house and associated infrastructure at Airlie House in Caronvale Road in Larbert. The application was validated on 23rd of February 2021 and refused under delegated powers by officers on the 6th of April 2021. The notice of review dates from 24th of April 2021. In terms of the description of development, the application site is located within the front garden of Airlie House, a large two-storey house from around the year 1900, whose principal east-facing elevation is well set back in landscaped grounds from Caronvale Road. The building is subdivided into 3 flats, and its grounds are subject to a tree preservation order. The application site is within land associated with the upper floor flat number 2 at Airlie House. The proposal is for the introduction of a part single-storey, part two-storey house comprising 4 bedrooms with a U-shaped ground floor plan and associated garden, hardstanding and access to the main road. The site history for this site is summarised on page 60 and discussed on page 63 of the meeting papers in front of you. Planning permission was refused for 2 houses and 3 garages in 2007, and that was also dismissed at appeal. In addition, planning permission in principle was refused in 2018 for 1 house and an outbuilding. Consultation responses for the original application here in front of us are detailed from page 68 of your papers onwards. The Council's Roads Development Unit, the Council's Environmental Health Team, and Scottish Water raised no objections to this proposal, with roads conditions and environmental health informatives requested in the event of approval. The Council's Landscape Officer made the following summarised observations, which are set out in detail in pages 72 to 73 of your papers. The first observation was that the proposed subdivision of the plot would be detrimental to the setting of Airlie House. Their second observation was that the application proposed the removal of 2 trees and a possible 2 further trees, making a total of 4, retained category A trees to the south of the development site may be subject to considerable pressure in future years to either remove or cut back these trees due to shading and/or perceived safety risks. Such work would reduce the remaining contribution of the trees and be detrimental to the tree preservation order in place. In terms of public representations, 13 were received from members of the public in response to the original application. These are summarised on page 60 of the meeting papers, and full copies are reproduced on pages 83 to 98 inclusive. A further 7 representations were received following the notice of review, and copies of these are reproduced at pages 99 to 110 inclusive. The policies and material considerations are detailed from page 62 of the meeting papers onwards, along with responses to consultations and public representations. Full wording of relevant policies are included from page 195 onwards. There are 2 reasons for refusal for this original application. The first refusal reason is as follows. The proposed development would not promote the 6 qualities of successful places as identified in Scottish planning policy. Existing natural and built heritage features would not be conserved, enhanced, or integrated sensitively into the development. The proposed dwelling house would result in an unacceptable form of tandem development, which would impact the character and setting of Airlie House and the surrounding area. The proposed development would impact the residential amenity of the surrounding area and the outlook from existing properties at Airlie House. The application is contrary to policies PE01 placemaking, HC02 windfall housing, and HC06 infill development and plot subdivision of the Falkirk Local Development Plan and Supplementary Guidance SG02 neighbourhood design. The second refusal reason is as follows. The application shows the removal of 2 to 4 trees to facilitate development. As such, the proposal would adversely affect the longevity, stability, and appearance of trees covered by a tree preservation order, contrary to policy PE20, trees, woodland, and hedgerows of the Falkirk Local Development Plan 2 and Supplementary Guidance SG10, trees and development. I'll just take a brief moment to have a drink of water there.
Fine.
Thank you very much, Provost. The appellant's case is that the proposal would improve the appearance. The notice of review is included at page 14 of the meeting papers, and the appellant's statement is reproduced at page 19. The appellant's case is that the proposal would improve the appearance of Airlie House by funding much needed maintenance and repairs to the original building, whilst improving views of the house through better maintenance of the grounds. The appellant argues that the size and scale of the proposed house would be subservient to Airlie House itself, that the established pattern of development in the wider area helps justify the current proposal, and that sufficient garden space would be retained for the existing flat number 2 at Airlie House. The appellant has also argued that only 1 tree would be removed as part of this application, as Falkirk Council has separately approved the felling of other trees. They have also committed to planting a minimum of 2 additional lime trees. They have disagreed with the landscape officer's concerns that there would be further pressure regarding trees, as the proposed buildings would be out with the root protection areas of the retained trees, and such trees would still be subject to the tree preservation order for this site. Now, that's the appellant's case. I'd just like to raise a few factual points here at this point. Members will have noted the difference between the council's landscape officer's comments and the appellant's case with regard to the number of trees proposed to be felled. So the appellant is saying there's only one to be felled. The landscape officer is saying that there's between 2 and 4 trees to be felled. Having looked into this, I can clarify that Falkirk Council did approve the felling of 2 trees along the southern boundary of the site, which were subject to a tree preservation order in July of 2020. However, these trees to be felled are separate to the 4 trees referred to by the landscape officer in their comments and in the refusal decision for the recent planning application. And the location of these trees, in addition to those where felling has already been approved, are shown on page 33 of your meeting papers. I'm happy to provide further clarity to members if required. It has also come to my attention that a tree survey originally submitted in support of the application by the appellant appears not to have been included in the meeting papers, whilst it remains accessible on the public case file for the original application. This contains details of the previous approved works to TPO'd trees and the condition of trees in the vicinity of the development site. I'm happy to take members through that if requested, so I'll leave that up to you, members. Thank you, Deputy Convener and Provost.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooney, for your submission. I'm now going to open it up to members. I'll come first to Councillor Blackwood. Just to say that we'll have an initial discussion and then we'll decide whether we require any further procedures. So, Councillor Blackwood.
Thanks, Jake. Am I allowed to ask a question about the site history and why the previous applications were refused, if it's in similar grounds to this one?
Well, we'll just clarify that, because as you probably know, and it's been highlighted by our legal officer this morning, that the presenter and the submission, Mr. Cooney, wasn't the case officer. So, Douglas, would it be, is it okay then to ask these particular questions, considering that Mr. Cooney was not the officer that brought forward the case in the first place?
I think that would be appropriate, Provost, if it's within Mr. Cooney's knowledge, and certainly the refusal reasons would be, or the appeal refusal is a matter of public record anyway. So
right.
Hopefully Mr. Cooney can give some more detail there.
Okay, Councillor Blackwood, if you just want to ask the question, sir.
Yeah, I'm asking the question about previous history. There's been refusals on appeal for erection of houses in this area. Could I ask the reason for refusal? Is it in the same lines as the current refusal, lines of refusal, or is it something entirely different?
This is discussed by the original case officer in the meeting papers, and I'll just find it and read it out to you. So just bear with me, Councillor Blackwood. Apologies for the delay there. So on page 63 of the meeting papers, so I'll just give you a few seconds to get that up in front of you. So I'm basically reading verbatim from the officer report ahead of the refusal earlier this year. Planning permission was refused by the council in 2007 for the erection of 2 dwelling houses and 3 garages in the front garden of Airlie House. The refusal was subsequently appealed to Scottish ministers. The reporter, in making his decision, commented that Airlie House is not listed, its qualities are appreciated in the community, and the site contributes much to an attractive street scene. The front lawn provides an appropriate foreground and dignified setting for the house. The reporter concluded that the application did not accord with the relevant policies of the Larbert and Stenhousemuir local plan or the Falkirk Council local plan finalised draft deposit version, and the appeal was dismissed. There was a further application in 2018, which was also refused planning permission. And then the officer goes on to say, it is considered that there has been no significant material change in circumstances. The general thrust of policy relating to infill development and the TPO remain unchanged in the now adopted Local Development Plan 2. It is also considered that the reporter's comments in relation to the important character and setting of Airlie House, although not listed, are relevant. It is noted that the current proposal is an improvement over previous proposals. However, the impact on the setting of Airlie House, the character of the area, and outlook from the lower flat have not been addressed. That is the original officer's commentary on that site history. Hopefully that's helpful to you, Councillor Blackwood.
Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Cooney.
you.
Any other
Just another quick-
questions?
Yeah, another quick question on the trees have been already felled. Falkirk Council gave permission for 2, but I believe there were more than 2 taken down.
It's my understanding, Councillor Blackwood, that the previous permission has been given for the removal of, I believe it was poplar trees along the front boundary of the site and other trees in the past few years. Those were given permission by Falkirk Council. The most recent tree felling approved by Falkirk Council related to 2 sycamore trees, which are along the southern boundary of the site, and they are separate to the ones that were referred to by the landscape officer. So the landscape officer would have had oversight over the approvals that were given regarding felled trees, but when this application came in, it was they did object to further trees being removed.
Okay, thank you. That's all I'm on, Gavina.
Okay, Councillor McCluskey.
Yes, Provost. Obviously, that answers that question. But the other question we've got, and obviously the officer has concluded that there's no change for the reporter's position. However, we've got a case put in that the cost would be done for the reimbursement or refurbishment of the Airlie House. Now, I'm asking the officer, what I see from the facts here is that the applicant has only recently bought it and only owns a third of the house. And the scale of the repairs of a third of her house doesn't seem to tie in with what would be gotten from a new plot in the grounds. And I was just trying to ask the officer, in his opinion, if he could summarise that summary, because it is a material reason sometimes when the cost of the plot is going to be invested in the business or for the cost. But the only bills we see have already for work previously done, and the cost of the roof would only be a third and doesn't get anywhere near part of the plot. So I was only asking the officer's opinion on these matters.
Mr. Cooney.
I'm just going to have a look at what the original officer said, because obviously there's a limitation to what I can say in my own personal view if I had been the officer for this, and I'm not going to go there. So just bear with me, and I'll just read through and see if there's anything that was taken into account by the original officer in those respects. What I would say in the meantime is that this did not engage the policy regarding heritage enabling development because it is not a listed property.
Yeah.
So that's something I would just say from the outset. But just bear with me, and I'll just have a quick read and just make sure that there was nothing that I haven't already seen. So just bear with me, please.
Thank you.
So having read through the officers' considerations, they did not take into account maintenance work that would be essentially funded by the sale of this site. And obviously, given that it isn't a listed building or a building in a conservation area, my interpretation of this is that that relevant policy wouldn't have been engaged anyway because it's not a relevant policy in this instance. I hope that answers the question, Councillor McLuckie.
Yes, I was just checking, as that says, we like to be thorough. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions, Councillor?
You're muted, Provost.
Sorry about that. One or two issues myself. I was actually going to bring up that point about, can you hear me okay? Yeah, I was going to bring that point up about the enabling development case, because in the submission from the applicant, it does highlight the fact that that has become more apparent since we have ownership of the house about the extensive refurbishment, and it would be requiring and utilising the funding for this development to pay for the repairs. But you've answered the question to Councillor McLuckie, and I'm satisfied with that. The next issue that I was going to ask a question on was in pages relating to page 21 of members would go to page 21. It states there, and referring to the attached pages, I was showing the street early. It mentions that previous approval from the Falkirk Council landscaping team and the considerate adoption of the landscape into the plan have added to the refusal to grant permission being completely unexpected. Now, I don't really understand the terminology for that one, and wonder if you could maybe, if possible, we understand your position not being the case officer, but the fact of the matter is in the report that they're saying that they have added to the refusal to grant permission being completely unexpected, as though they thought that they were going to actually get the planning.
Thank you, Provost. So I've looked back at some of the correspondence in looking into which trees got approval to be felled prior to this application coming in. It seems there was a good dialogue between the appellant, the now appellant, and the landscape officer when it was regarding the removal of the trees that were given approval in I believe it was July or August 2020. Namely the two sycamores along the southern part of the site. And I know that there was pre-application discussion between the original planning officer and the appellant and perhaps their agent regarding a design of a house at the front of Airlie House. Now, my interpretation of that is that there was discussion, there was design iterations that kind of got progressively more well designed as time went on, but it wasn't the case that the officer, and it wouldn't be for the officer to promise approval anyway, but there was no point at which the officer said that this is definitely going to be approved or anything like that. So it is sometimes the case that a pre-application discussion between an officer of the council and the applicant results in a scheme coming in that was better than that one originally proposed at the start of said discussions, but still has issues to overcome. So no kind of I don't recall seeing any sentences in emails saying that this is now likely to be approved.
Okay, thank you. I think the question was worth asking though, because obviously it's in the submission brought in by the applicant in the submission for the refusal decision. Okay, I'm going to go back to the members this morning, asking if they believe that they require any further procedure, or are they happy to consider the decision at this meeting this morning? Councillor Blackwood, have you anything else to come in and add?
No, and I think maybe we'll make a decision on this information we have.
Okay, Councillor McCluckie, do you require any more information?
No, I think there's enough information on this application, Provost.
Okay, then that's fine. So what we're saying then is, just for the record, is that the review committee have decided that they require no further procedure, and they're going to consider the decision at this meeting this morning. So I'm coming back to either yourself, Councillor Blackwood, or Councillor McCluckie, in relation to this.
So there, convener, aye.
Yeah.
Go on. My position is quite clear. Obviously, I've read the detailed papers that the officer were correct in their view of refusing the application.
Councillor McCluckie.
Provost, I would rather hear from you first, because being a local member for that ward, obviously, as I say, you know it very well, and I would like to wait my comment to you've said, if that is okay, and giving your position, please.
I've no problem in that. I agree with Councillor Blackwood on that, and I would formally move the officer's recommendation in this case. If Councillor Blackwood's going to second me, without putting words into his mouth.
Happy to second you, Provost.
Councillor McCluckie.
I'm happy to agree, Provost, with information supplied, and like it says, we have went through the comments and the information received. As I says, we've asked the officer for all the relevant details, and I think we've come up with a decision.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Blythe, we'll come back to you, sir. As the committee's decision that we agree that the decision taken by the officers. Do you require any further information from us? Are you quite happy to go forward with that?
I think just for the record, convener, I'm sensing some unanimity amongst the members that they're satisfied there's sufficient information from the papers, and they're also satisfied that the case officer has applied the correct policies and has arrived at the correct decision, and that they are minded to uphold that refusal.
Fine, thank you. Members agreed to that, Councillor Blackwood, Councillor McCluckie? You're happy with that summary for Mr. Blythe? Yep. Fine. Yep. Okay, then that just takes me, give the opportunity to thank everyone, Mr. Cooney for bringing and summarising the report this morning, Mr. Blythe for his legal interpretations, Tonya for organising the meeting, and other than that, to the two other members, I'd like to thank you very much for your presence this morning. And that concludes the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Provost.
Thank you.